Hi, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. I'm Ourielle the Stitch Witch, and today we are talking about patterns you can make as a beginner knitter. Let's jump into it. Hey, welcome back to the StitchWitch Podcast. I'm so excited to have you. I'm your host, Ourielle. Today, we're going to be talking about projects you can make as a beginner knitter. This is coming from someone who just started knitting, made all of these patterns, recommends all these patterns. I think this is going to be like short and sweet, easy display. If I can find the B-roll of everything, I will show you what items I made and what I made them out of. So again, this is the caveat, which is that everyone knits at their own pace. Everyone is kind of like doing their own thing. No knitting program or like knitting journey is going to be the same for any two people unless you are literally doing something step by step with someone else. But I will say I have spent a lot of time on the knitting internet, in knitting stores. I have traveled not across the country, but I have done a lot of interstate travel, and part of the like things that I make a point to do is to pop into the local yarn stores and like see what the local knitting culture is like. So I have really fallen head over heels into this hobby, into this like, I want to say lifestyle because that seems like a strong word, but like I do really enjoy knitting. I really enjoy what it's done for me, and I am again on this journey to brainwash people into trying it with me so we can have one really OP like hot girl knitting group and like we can all kind of like be in the same thing. So that's my MO. Okay, I'm telling you straight up right now. My MO is to get you to enjoy knitting. And so with that, I thought it'd be fun to do a roundup of like what can you actually do in a few months of knitting. When I say a few months, again, like, mind you, this is different for every person. I'm not saying that this is your few months. I'm not saying that this is like an impressive amount of stuff to do in a few months. I'm just saying that I was able to do this as a beginner who didn't know how to knit purl, didn't know how to read a pattern, didn't really understand like what needles to use, didn't really understand like different yarn types. This is all within the realm of reason. And it's gonna look a little bit overwhelming because it's a lot of different stuff. I will walk you through the patterns that I chose and made and kind of like what I learned throughout the way and maybe tips for people who like are not sure what's included. But yeah, let's just get started. The first thing are patterns that I found online. So I made quite a few headbands and cowls from online tutorials. Now I do want to disclose that I'm coming from a crochet background. So even though I technically didn't know how to knit, I did know how to crochet. And I, for whatever reason, I think the crochet world, at least the modern crochet world or modern crochet culture, a lot of it is online. A lot of it is like YouTube videos or patterns with YouTube videos. I think there's something about the crochet world that is just a little bit more, I don't want to say new school, but I think I was able to find a lot more free patterns from crochet than I am able to find free patterns for knitting, at least in video format. So when I first started learning to knit, I really kind of jumped headfirst into like the video tutorials because that's what I was used to. And I know that there is like complaints on all sides about how it's more work, it's not necessary, yada, yada, yada. But just for me, as someone who requires accommodations, as someone who like has maybe like a non-standard way of learning, the visual learning is fucking helpful, okay? It's really nice to have an up-close, top-down view of someone moving with their hands, being able to speed up and slow down and rewind and to not feel like you're bothering someone. If you're going in person and someone's showing you something, you feel like there's like a limit to how many times you can ask them to show you something. It's also hard to process audio sometimes, so the captions are really helpful for me. There's like all sorts of reasons as to why videos for me are really accessible, and so I started there. I will mention a few of the people that I remember. I think one of them is Blue Mouse Knits. There were a few cowls that I made. One of them was like a textured honeycomb cowl. Another one was like a mock cable cowl, and those are great gifts. So I did those for the holiday season. I did those for winter. There was also a sock pattern. So the Crazy Sock Lady has a great vanilla sock pattern, which I followed and I made that as a gift. A sock would not be like a great first introduction because it includes magic loop. It includes like a small gauge. Granted, I started a sock as one of my first projects and it was fine. Like it's not like you can't do it, but I think you need to be very motivated to do a sock for your first project. And there's also a fantastic textured cowl by, I think it might be Broken Rib or something, but needless to say, I will list the cowl patterns that I personally have used. I have also done headbands. So I think I've mentioned that the first few things I've done were headbands. There's a seed stitch headband. There are all kinds of like faux fisherman's rib headbands. And of course, you know, if you crochet, there's a bajillion and one crochet beanie headband tutorials. And those are great. One that I've recently done within like, you know, the first few, I'm still a beginner knitter, right? Within the first few months of knitting, I have learned brioche, which is, you know, when you use two color brioche. So you knit forward and then you knit that same thing again and then you slide it over and then you do it again, right? So it is a different way of approaching knitting. So I wouldn't recommend it again as my first project, but when you have a video, when you're able to like rewind, when you are able to kind of see the hows and whys of the architecture of the knitting, I find that to be really helpful. So with all that being said, this first category of online tutorials, I'm going to put all of them down in the down bar below. I'm going to organize them based on what I found. But the other free pattern that I knit pretty early on was also Tin Can Knit's World's Simplest Mittens or World's Easiest Mittens. And this is one that is very, very well documented online, on Ravelry, I think on forums and stuff like that. And it's beautiful. I've actually made 2 already. I'm in the process of making a 3rd pair and they're great. This pattern in particular is fantastic because it accommodates various gauges. So from fingering weight all the way to bulky weight, the numbers are there for whatever like weight of yarn, whatever gauge you want to knit at. And it also includes sizes for different people. So there's children's sizes, there's teen sizes, you know, adult, small, medium, large, that kind of thing. So you can really knit mittens for the whole family, which is kind of what I've been doing. Besides that, I think the rest of my patterns are actually paid for patterns. So I am the kind of person who will knit something like 3 or 4 times. Like actually, I really get my use out of my patterns. And I think that's how it should be. I think there are plenty of people who will buy a pattern and knit it once and they'll be like, okay, like I'm bored, I want to move on to the next thing. And I really respect that. I have like almost a jealousy of being that kind of person because like I want to explore more stuff too, but there's a piece of me that feels like financially, unless I'm pirating like the pattern, which I don't want to do. So if I'm paying for a pattern, I'm going to try to get as many uses out of that pattern as possible. So for me, the rest of these are paid for patterns. I will try to show you the changes or like the modifications I've made if possible, and I will try to do them in order of when I've approached them. So the first thing I casted on was the Sophie shawl. And I casted this on right after Rhinebeck. So if you are part of the knitting world, that's late October. So that's when I started knitting for the first time, is the end of October last year. And I didn't understand how to read the pattern. I totally misinterpreted how much yarn I needed. And so my first Sophie shawl is a little bit of a disaster. It ended up needing like 3 separate like balls of main yarn, 3 separate like balls of mohair yarn. I didn't know like when to attach or like how to do it, but that was the first project that I casted on. I finished it. Is it good? No. Do I still love her? Do I still wear her? Yes. And I have like a better one now because I've completed 3 since then. But yeah, Sophie shawl was the first one. After that is the Harriet bonnet. And this is again one of my most worn pieces. I have seen a lot of people be like, who's gonna wear a bonnet in real life? No one's gonna wear a bonnet. I mean, I see it trending, but no one's gonna wear a bonnet in real life. First of all, to all you naysayers, I wear my bonnet in real life, okay? I love my fucking bonnet. I look so cool and so fun, and I look like an overgrown baby, but that's always been like what I want to look like anyway. So, you know, upon first impression, I was like, why does no one like bonnets? And then upon like rethinking it for a moment, maybe because people don't want to look like overgrown babies like I do. But yeah, the Harriet bonnet was actually quite easy to make. I will say the harder thing about the Harriet bonnet is learning how to pick up stitches, which sounds scary, but it's not scary. You just use your needle to pick up stitches horizontally and not vertically, or you pick them up vertically and not horizontally. And the other thing I incorporated with that was how to do stripes. I did not learn. Yeah, I guess it was fine because it was knit flat, so I didn't even have to worry about jogless stripes, but basically striping, so making sure that I was able to manage like 2 balls of yarn. With the Sophie scarf, the thing that I would kind of call the learnable skill is how to do the I-cord and how to count your stitches and to determine right side from wrong side, which sounds really simple, but when you get down to it, it's one of those really basic skills that is not so basic once you realize not knowing how to do that thing really can come back and bite you in the ass later. So yeah, that was the Sophie shawl. That was the Harriet bonnet. I think the next thing I did was probably one of those cowls, like working in the round. And that's the next like big thing, is like learning how to join in the round. Once you learn how to join in the round, it's a lot easier to kind of like open up the world for you, because now you can do kind of like seamless top-down sweaters. You can do like small circumference items like socks, like sleeves. You can also do things that are bigger, obviously like hats, headbands, that kind of thing. So I think from there, I did the fire pit mitts and leg warmers. Now, mitts and leg warmers are things that you can find a dime a dozen. Like, you will be able to find all kinds of patterns, crochet patterns, knitting patterns, of course, and shaping, no shaping. So they can be as simple as like a rectangle with like a little sleeve or like a little cutout for your thumb. It can also be something as dramatic as like really, you know, intricate ribbing on the top, you know, cables on the bottom, you know, flares at the bottom. So you've got like shaping, all that kind of jazz. You can learn different bindings. So things to make them more stretchy or less stretchy, things to make them edge, like finish seamlessly versus like a visible binding. And you can find all kinds of stuff, but the ones that I used were the Fire Pit mitts from Taylor Earl, and that's because I watch her podcast, Wool Needle Hands. She owns the company Fiber for the People. And when I talked about in my previous video, they're not being like huge influencers in like the knitting space, but there are business owners who are like really, really happy to provide value. She's one of those really fantastic resources, hosts not only a knitting podcast, but also kind of like a tip line. She does all kind of informational stuff. So if you're looking for someone who really knows her way around like the industry, and I think she was also a teacher, I believe a history teacher or a science teacher. There's a lot of us former teachers or current teachers in this knitting world doing this kind of thing. So yay, there's a club. The other one being high fiber knits. So the three of us are like vibing as like former teachers or current teachers. But yeah, I followed her pattern just because I was watching her content. It was a little bit challenging for me because it's less hand-holding than something like the PetiteKnit patterns or like the Milena Paulina pattern, right? So this was the first time that I had kind of a briefer pattern, but I got through it fine. The only thing that I had trouble with was, I think, the thumb gusset and closing up some of the stitches when I moved to DPNs, because you're working with a teeny tiny little thing, and that's when you have to use double pointed needles. So that's when I went to YouTube. I typed in how to do like thumb gussets or whatever it was, and my favorite resource for that is the Chili Dog or Chili Dog knits. So you can make easily fingerless mitts. You can make them as shaped or not shaped as you want. Again, there are a few good patterns that I will post up here or I'll list down below. Legwarmers, again, if you want to find like an amazing resource, IkoXun is great. She is around my age. I think she maybe is a few years younger. She seems a few years younger. Brilliantly talented, very ingenuitive mind, great at like having a vision in her head or seeing something in real life and being like, I'm gonna fucking make that, okay? No one's gonna stop me. And she has like a whole video on how to do leg warmers, like the ultimate guide to leg warmers. She shows you how to do like color work charts, how to add like I-cord ribbons, how to add embellishments, how to do cables. Like, so she's great as an overall resource and just general human inspiration for being able to like do whatever the hell you want and like not be held back. So yeah, leg warmers and hand warmers are something you can definitely make as a beginner. I think, I guess as a person, I like to approach these skills as like things that I learn how to do with the full understanding that it's going to be hard for me to learn them. So I didn't really jump into garments. I know there are plenty of people who learn to knit maybe like a washcloth, and then they're like, great, I learned how to knit, I learned how to purl, I learned how to do basic shaping, and now I'm gonna make a sweater. And that's great. Like, go you girl. I think there are plenty of people who do that because they have a strong vision of what they want to make, and then they go and they're kind of like goal oriented. Whereas for me, I was much happier learning the skills like one at a time. So I went on to doing the Easy Project Bag. I think this is by Ozetta. If it's not by Ozetta, I will correct myself, but the picture is here, and I have two of these. I made one as a gift net, and then I made one for myself as a kind of scrap busting project. These are like, it's an amazing pattern. It's really great. It's very simple. I think the effect is very, like the effect is deceptively polished for what the only harder things were for this was doing a double knit or a fold down edge, sewing down the edge, which that was kind of hard because it was new to learn. But again, it's not hard. It's not hard. I guess none of knitting is hard if you have enough in your pocket to like take the next step. In the same way that, like, I don't know, when you practice running, seeing someone run like a 5-minute mile is scary, but like when you run yourself, you don't go from like a 12-minute mile to a 5-minute mile. You run a little bit faster every single time, but every single time you're pushing yourself just a little bit more. The expectation is not that you're going to go from knitting a washcloth to making the folklore cardigan, right? So I think for me, learning how to do the double knit, you know, fold and to get it like so clean and perfect, I remember feeling absolutely euphoric. And I kept holding it up and being like, babe, look at how clean this line is. And he was like, yeah, that's nice. And I'm like, feel it, feel how like squishy it is. I tied it down evenly, like none of my ribbing is like uneven. Like I picked up all 100 stitches all around the edge and I didn't fuck anything up. And to me, it was like the most amazing thing because I've never done it before. Was it actually physically that hard? No. But I think there's like a mental block around having not done something before and feeling like it is indicative of a harder pattern and then being a little bit like put off by trying something new. So I want to say the Easy Project Bag is easy. There are also embedded tutorials in the pattern. So like you'll click it'll say like double folded band, and then there's going to be a link that says how to do the double folded band. And I believe the video is in a foreign language, but there are English subtitles. So for me, that was accessible. You'll have to gauge whether or not that's accessible for you. Most of my viewers are from the US, so hopefully that's helpful as a starter. The other bag is the bindle bag, but I also have like a ton of free bags. Oh my god, I'm gassy, sorry. I also have a ton of free bags that I can post here. There's an onigiri bag, there's I think like an acorn bag that's pretty cute. Like all of these kind of small bags are actually not that hard once you start to learn how to do stuff in the round. The other thing that's really fun to pursue is felted projects. So felted coasters, which I made 2 sets as housewarming gifts, and I used Noro yarn, which is, I don't want to say notorious, but like coveted, I guess, like widely coveted for its beautiful color changes, for the way that the yarn is spun. For me, the eco-friendly processing and the wabi-sabi ethos and kind of like the philosophy behind the owner of the mill was really important to me. So I am like a Noro stan, but Noro yarn makes really, really beautiful felted coasters. And what felting is kind of like, sheets of like arts and craft felt. That is, I think the stuff you'll find at stores is artificial, but like real felted or fulled product is a natural animal material that has all the fibers kind of like netted together with the heat and the agitation, and it becomes this really thick, sturdy, beautiful, kind of water resistant, waterproof, like thick, durable, how many words can I use? But it's a really great kind of finished product that is wonderful for coasters and bags and all kinds of things that need structure, that need a little bit of strength. If you need something that is heat resistant, you don't want to use something like plastic for like a hot pot / pan holder. What is it called? A pot holder, right? So those kinds of like home tools, I made quite a few, and those are pretty easy because they're flat or they're in the round or whatever. You can crochet them, you can knit them. Lots of beautiful patterns for that. And I think the last thing I want to mention, I didn't mention hats. So the weekend hat and the Oslo hat, I also have a pattern called the Leah hat, and that one's slightly different because I think they're a German short rows. But yeah, those projects are really great because they help you learn either double knitting or like ribbing, getting used to ribbing, getting used to having even tension, and also getting used to doing even decreases and shaping at the crown. So those are skills that you can also learn, that they're not too scary. And also, again, on a hat, the shaping and the overall like time frame for doing a hat is much smaller than doing shaping on like a sweater, where if you mess up the sweater, you've just wasted like 1,000+ yards of yarn and probably like dozens of hours into your work, right? So for me, it's more important to practice these skills on like a smaller project. So the Oslo hat, the weekend hat, those are good choices. And of course, the Purl Soho page, which is actually a yarn store, they also do like a bajillion million patterns that are all free and accessible to the public. The only difference is that I think for me, I haven't done a ton of Purl Soho because they tend to use skinnier yarn, and I have a very, very tight knitting gauge, which I don't dislike. I kind of like the fabric that I get. And I find that trying to knit looser for me feels a little bit more unnatural. So I personally have not had great success with Purl Soho patterns just because I'm not able to like use my yarn with their patterns, and that's fine. But just to let you guys know, Purl Soho is a really big one. And then the last thing as a beginner is a sock. Now, I kind of alluded to the fact that sock requires a little bit of finagling because you'll have to learn this process called magic loop. But a beginner can definitely learn magic loop. I kind of decided that magic loop was such a tactical and practical thing to learn that there was no point in putting it off. There really is, I don't want to say like no reason to put it off. And plenty of people might have strong opinions whether they like it or dislike it. But for me, magic loop makes a lot possible with very little. So what basically it is a matter of doing small items that normally you would need a specific needle of that size, but you can do it with any kind of long needle because you're splitting it in half and doing it in like sections and basically flip-flopping back and forth. I don't have problems personally with laddering. I don't have problems with my tension. I don't have problems with it like looking visibly magic looped. But I do know that is what some people complain about, like having to pull out the needles and like having to like learn it from the beginning. I will say for me, I have personally, this is just my 2 cents, I have found it worth the investment in learning because as confusing as it was to finagle in the beginning, now I feel like I don't need to buy more materials. I don't need to make sure that I have exactly the right circumference of stuff. I feel like I can do projects on the go. There is kind of a more natural stopping point for me. So I tend to prefer magic loop over going, in a spiral all the time. But both are now available to me because I decided to learn it early on. So socks were a great one for me. Again, I used the Crazy Sock Ladies pattern. And I downloaded her DK weight sock for my beginner. That's what I would recommend for a beginner because it's a thicker sock. I wouldn't recommend starting with like, you know, a 2.5 millimeter, you know, fingering weight sock yarn just because it is going to be a nightmare if you have something that goes wrong, or it takes you like an hour to knit like an inch. It is just going to be a little bit demoralizing. So start with a slightly thicker gauge. You'll be amazed at how much nicer a hand knit sock is compared to a commercial sock. When I tell you, I put on my first sock that I made with, it was the DK weight version of the Crazy Sock Ladies vanilla sock. And vanilla just refers to like nothing special about it. Like it just is a plain basic sock with no extra trimmings, no extra fat, no nothing special. But when I tell you, I put it on and I was like, I never want to put on a commercial sock ever again. Never. I never want to wear a factory produced sock in my life. And obviously that's not practical because like a girl's got to go work out and like sometimes you need to have no-show socks, whatever, it is what it is. And tragically, I can only knit so much in my life. But the difference in fit, the difference in comfort, the difference in breathability. I had mentioned that I bought these like Target like wool socks and they were 17% wool and like 80-something% plastic, and they still cost me $50. And with $50 you can buy enough yarn for a perfect wool sock, like a fully wool sock. If you're a beginner, FYI, don't make a sock out of 100% wool. It's not recommended because you're going to wear through it. So when we say wool sock, it's wool with a little bit of nylon for strength. But yeah, it is just like, it's amazing how fulfilling, when I say it's fulfilling, it's a flex. It is like life affirming to be like, I can make something that suits my needs and then some. You don't understand. Like, you don't understand, like when we talk about, like I'm no stranger to the idea that like clothing is not the way that it used to be, or like, they don't just like, they don't make clothing the way like they're supposed to make clothing, like everything falls apart, planned obsolescence is like a conspiracy. What else do people say? Like, you know, we have so much clothing and for what? Because everything is disgusting. And like, you don't really understand that until you have one pair of your favorite socks that fit you like a glove, that you made yourself. There's not a single hole. There's not a single like stretch. It like molds to the shape of your foot. It keeps you together. It doesn't make you sweaty. Like it's just, the joy is inexplicable. It really is. It really is crazy. I think that's everything. Oh, the last one that I have is the Copacabana headband from Milena Paulina. I love her patterns. I think her design aesthetic is really quite clean and quite pretty. You'll notice that a lot of the stuff that I've put on here is actually quite plain. Now that's because as a beginner, it's a little bit harder to do things like keeping track of lace charts, keeping track of cable charts, keeping track of like pattern repeats. So if something has to repeat like every 12, 16, or 4 rows, you're gonna have to find some kind of way to track that. Another kind of like intermediate to more advanced skill is doing like 3 things at the same time. So being able to do like a pattern repeat or color work and do shaping and do like cables at the same time. Like it can just be a lot of things at once. Or maybe it's something about like an advanced technique where like steeking is involved, where you're gonna knit something in the round, then you're gonna cut it open with like a pair of scissors, right? So knitting can be like a full world of like unlimited levels of maximum skill required. But I will say this list is pretty long, and given that I was able to do this many things and to be able to vary it, don't forget that you can adjust weight. So if you are someone who, for instance, you want to make like a basic t-shirt, and I'll list like a few t-shirt patterns that are really popular here. You could do it in like a thinner mohair, you could do it in a silk, you can also bring it up to something like a heavier worsted weight and kind of have it be great for like autumn. You can also do it with eyelets, so there are versions with eyelets, there's versions with stripes. You can do a v-neck, you can do a round neck. There are also patterns, if you're a beginner wanting to kind of extend your reach, patterns that have various views, right? So in sewing patterns, I think they're called views, where like maybe this one has like, again, like a round neck, this one has a v-neck, this one has a button band, this one is cropped, this one is long, this one has a kind of like elastic cinching at the waistline, this one has a tall funnel neck, this one doesn't. So I am thinking of a few patterns that come with, you know, various views. So the White Mountain sweater is one where there's different kinds of necklines. The ranunculus, of course, can be in different weights. So you'll see a lot of patterns will show you from light to heavy, like what can you get. I just placed an order for a pattern called the Very Varied Vest. Very Varied Vest. And that one comes with like v-neck, crew neck, buttons, no buttons, and tarja. So like there's all kinds of things you can do as a beginner to kind of stretch your dollar. And like I said, if you don't want to buy patterns with different views, feel free to play around with different stuff, like different weights, different kinds of yarn, stripes or no stripes, speckle or no speckle. You're going to hold things double or hold things single. scrappy or not scrappy, right? There's like a whole world out there in ways that you can kind of make minuscule adjustments, even as a beginner, fairly confidently. And again, my biggest piece of advice is to start with small accessories. Like start with home items, start with winter items like hats, scarves, cowls, mittens, maybe not like big scarves, but like little scarves, like the Sophie scarf. That's a great one. And I think that makes a really fantastic gift. Also, my other advice for beginners is to understand different yarn weights and understand different yarn weights, understand different yarn compositions, and understand kind of how to blend them for the pattern in question. And I think when you're able to kind of do the mix and matching at the beginning, you're more able to tackle bigger projects, which is where I am now. I feel like finally, after like a good few months and a few dozen projects of being like, we're gonna try this, we're gonna try that, everything on a very small, I don't want to say dinky scale, but it feels a little bit like I was waiting to get to the point where like I feel more proficient. I was waiting for the point where I could really get into my big girl knits. But now I feel like I could do a brioche cardigan, right? Or now I feel like I could do double knitting or like full broken rib tank top. I feel like I understand different materials better, superwash versus non-superwash. I just think I absorbed enough from people who have made the mistakes before me, who say something like, I didn't block my superwash yarn and I made this sweater and now it's like 3 sizes too big and I have to do sweater surgery. Like that all can be avoided by working with superwash in a hat, right? And then like the mistake is made on a much smaller scale with fewer hours, with fewer tiers, ideally, because it's like a smaller thing. So yeah, that is generally, hopefully, a gateway for patterns. Again, these are all things that I personally knit, so I'm not sure, like I'm sure there's more, right? Like I'm not even gonna say I'm not sure. I am sure there are like thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of patterns for beginners that are fantastic. If you haven't already signed up for Ravelry, I would loosely recommend it, right? If you are intrigued, because there's like an endless plethora of knitting patterns. Again, this is like a very user-friendly database style website where you can find stuff. You can sort it by the amount of yarn that you have. You can sort it by the kind of yarn that you have. You can sort it by the difficulty level and also by how popular the projects are. You can see people's notes. If there's a mistake in the pattern, it's like not peer-reviewed per se, but like people will tell you frequently, like the size medium has an error here, and people will put the comments there. You can see how it looks on different body types. So I am a huge user of Ravelry. If you are able to use it, it's free to sign up and everything, but some people who have disabilities, like the website is not, I think that's the problem. I think the website is not up to par with the ADA standards for universal design guidelines. I'm not sure what the drama is, but I do know some people for personal reasons or whatever don't use Ravelry. So if that's not you, then my hat's off to you and you can find a different, resource. I think there are plenty of places that people do try to get patterns, but Ravelry is a great place for beginners. And if not that, then Instagram and of course YouTube. Is that everything? Okay, it's not everything that I made, but it is like generally the kinds of stuff that I made. I will say there's one thing that I made and I thought it was going to be really challenging, and then I made it and it wasn't too bad, and that is the Bunny Clava by Letty, and she's the owner behind Downtown Yarns in New York City, which is like the coolest yarn store ever. I highly, highly recommend if you can make it down to Downtown Yarns. Slay. That place is like the vibes immaculate. The people who work there incredibly cool. I love it so much. But yeah, the Bunny Clava hat, it actually has like these 2 bunny ears that like stick straight up, and it's kind of like a cool like beanie style hat. Love and adore. And that was like a fun project as well. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it in terms of like beginner projects that like you're able to make. And of course, I'm not including things like blankets, but blankets are also pretty easy because you can either do like one stitch pattern or you learn how to do like a block and you seam them together. So and right now there's a few that are trending, but yeah, that is everything. I think that's it. I just want to say again, like I've only been knitting for a few months. I have knit a lot over the last few months because I have made it a priority. Oh my god, my bangs look crazy. I have made it a priority to knit a lot. So again, I'm not saying that all of this is like doable for you within a few months or you should do it or whatever. But just for reference, I wanted to tell you what I've got going on so you can kind of contextualize it in your life. And I hope this was useful. If you'd like more of these, if you want to do like more explorations into this kind of thing, I'm so happy to entertain that. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!